The world needs more people with curious minds. People who aren't afraid to admit when they don't know something. We need to take the time to encourage more lifelong learners. At least that's my goal with this podcast. I think the future is at stake. But at the same time, I do believe that a more informed population can and will move humanity forward. All we have to do is keep learning. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Nick Learns Everything. Let's just jump right into it. So, I was recently listening to an episode of Joe Rogan's podcast last week, and I love that guy. I love his podcast. I think it's the number one podcast in the world right now, so you've probably heard of it and are familiar with him. But anyway, so I was listening to it last week, and he had a guest on, and I forget the guy's name, but I think he was like the brother of like a regular guest that Joe has on, and he's like a specific type of biologist or something like that. But anyway, so Joe and the guest got into this little discussion about leafcutter ants. And they only talked about it for a few minutes, but I thought it was really interesting. So I did a bunch of research about it, and bro, it is wild. So leafcutter ants are described by the Encyclopedia Britannica as, quote, any of 39 ant species abundant in the American tropics, easily recognized by their foraging columns composed of hundreds or thousands of ants carrying small pieces of leaves. These moving trails of cut foliage often stretch over 100 feet across the forest floor and up and down the trunks of canopy trees. So let's go ahead and break that down a little bit. Basically, leafcutter ants are any of 39 different ant species that are mostly found in tropical Central and South America. They span primarily from southern Mexico down to Brazil to give you an idea of how far the species is spread out. And I actually also read that you can find them in parts of Texas and western Louisiana as well, but I'd have to look back into that to be able to describe it a little more specifically. Now, these ants are known for the large number of workers that their colonies have. Like I said, in some instances, hundreds or thousands. Oftentimes, leafcutter ant colonies are found with hundreds or thousands of ants all at once, carrying these little tiny pieces of leaves from trees and plants back to their nest. And right now, you might be thinking that they're carrying those leaves because that's what they eat, that's their food. At least that's what I thought, but that isn't really the case at all. And this is where things start to get trippy. And I want to turn to the work of the website antarch.net because I thought they did a really good job of summarizing a lot of my findings. I know that website didn't sound like the most scientific thing you've ever heard, but what they wrote, I think, really summarizes sort of a lot of what I researched. So they said, quote, these ants are gardeners. They cut and carry leaves back to their nest where they create an environment ideal to grow a special fungus which the ants use for food and antibiotics. The nests are so large that they build their own ventilation systems to maintain a constant flow of fresh air for the ants and the fungus growth. So they essentially need those leaves that they're carrying around to grow their food in the same way that we use fertilizer to grow our food. And if you think that's going to be the craziest part of this podcast, then I want you to take a second and remember back to when you watched that first episode of Tiger King. And you thought to yourself that the craziest part of that show was going to be Carol Baskin's outfits. You were only one episode in. I mean, sure, her outfits are definitely crazy. They're eye-opening to see someone who dresses like that every day. And it might be something that you haven't seen before. But just like with Tiger King, you are about to learn a lot more about a whole bunch of stuff that you probably didn't even realize was going on. and also similar to Tiger King, you're not really going to be able to explain why any of it is happening. For example, the fungus piles that the ants are growing release nitrous oxide. And so the ants have developed ventilation systems inside their nests that were described by a researcher named Fiona Soper in a University of Montana study as, quote, creating point emissions that can rival human engineered systems, such as wastewater treatment plants. And right now you're probably thinking, nuh-uh. But in fact, yeah, they have literal ventilation systems where the technology rivals our human engineered point emissions technology. And you also might be thinking that some of the ants or all of the ants that are carrying those leaves are the same ants that make the fungus piles and ventilation systems. And you would also be wrong because I found a 2020 article by Jamie Heimbuch that puts it like this, quote, a leafcutter ant colony is made of ants that fit different roles, such as workers and soldiers. But a surprising role is that of tiny protector. There are ants whose job it is to protect leaves from parasitic flies and wasps. These ants, called menum ants, ride on the leaves and pluck off any parasites that could cause disease or destruction if the parasite made its way into the ant colony. And to add on to that, I also found research that even says that some leafcutter ants specialize in raising the young, and there are others who focus on removing weeds and disease inside the hive. So, yeah, they have legitimate specialized jobs. And to be honest, they probably have socialized medicine as well because of the antibiotics and the fungus. I mean, I doubt that these ants are finding themselves in a debate about which format, whether virtual or in person, they should conduct their own debates, where they will debate on healthcare plans. And yet, at the end of the day, after they have those debates, regardless of what they decide on, a small group of old whites is going to get more wealthy than they already are. I just don't think the ants are dealing with those type of problems. So, not only do they have specialized jobs like we do, but they actually are probably better at politics than we are. They're probably better at medicine than we are. I mean, in the context of their world that they're living in, I would say they definitely are. But back to the ants. I know earlier I mentioned that the colonies have hundreds of thousands of ants, but as I kept researching more, it turns out that some colonies have as many as 10 million ants. Think about what I just said. Imagine picking up like 10 ants and holding them in your hand. Now multiply that amount in your hand by a million fucking ants. That's how many ants some of these colonies have. Jamie Heimbuch also writes that according to Marietta College, a large nest can have thousands of chambers. Some of these might be a foot in diameter. Some chambers are used for brood, others are for the fungal gardens, and in some species, there are chambers used for trash, like the landfills that we use. They literally have chambers where they create a landfill. She says scientists studying the nests have used bulldozers to recover them. And the reason that they need bulldozers with a Z, because I think I just said bulldozers, is because I found out that some of these nests can be almost 30 feet below the ground. To give you some perspective on that, keep in mind that the average 2-story single family home that you see is about 30 feet in height. And some of these ant nests are that far under the ground. They've also found nests underground that span over an acre. And so all of this is wild by itself. It's all crazy when you really, really think about it. But I started to get curious about how these colonies spring up. And like other species of insects, each colony has one queen. That's it. There's just one. She is the one and only. And if you were to find a colony, you could probably figure out which one's the queen very quickly because she's way bigger than all of the worker ants that are caring for her. And I actually found one website that described the queen as very chubby. And I was just like, come on, bro. Like, she's a little thick, but like, you know what I'm saying? But like, to me, like, I think that's a good thing. Like, the author sort of wrote it in a way where like, when I read it, I thought, like, she kind of talked about the ant, like the ant made out with her prom date. And I was just kinda like, "Alright, we gotta chill." Like, if you calling ants very chubby, I don't know if that's the wording, uh, the scientific wording that we need to be going with. Seems like you a little jealous. But anyway, I found out that only 2.5% of queens will actually succeed in establishing a colony. And I think that's pretty cool because I think the reality is that makes the colonies a pretty rare thing. The fact that they exist is very rare. It's sort of like humans. I mean, we're a seemingly super rare thing in the universe. I mean, there's definitely aliens out there, and in my opinion, that's a fact. I mean, we can talk about that anytime you want. I'm glad to talk to anyone on this podcast about the existence of aliens, but I'm not going to dive into that right now. Let's just say there are aliens, but I don't think the majority of alien species are Homo sapiens. I don't think you would describe them as humanoids necessarily. Maybe some, but I still think we are a very rare thing that has occurred similar to these ants because these ant colonies, there's only 2.5% of queens are able to actually establish one. So they are very rare. And that weird similarity between them and us in my mind brought me to some interesting thoughts. And so I continued my research and I found a Rice University paper that started with the following paragraph. And I think this paragraph is super interesting. So it reads, quote, like humans, leafcutter ants grow crops. And like humans, farming allows the ants to produce enough food to support millions of individuals who work at specialized jobs. But while people invented agriculture at the dawn of civilization about 10,000 years ago, leafcutters began cultivating massive subterranean fungus gardens more than 10 million years ago. They've essentially been using our forms of specialized jobs in agriculture for way longer than we have. And I think we're confused as to how they do it so seamlessly, but I really don't think we should be. They've just been doing this for far longer than we have. And that's an interesting thought because in all my research, scientists can't explain how these ants communicate or how they figured out how to create these civilizations and live like this. We have no idea how they're doing it, but they are. And they've been doing it a hell of a lot longer than us, according to the science. They've become more efficient as a civilization over time, and it seems to be a lesson that I think we can grab onto as humans. They've continued to get more efficient, and we're going to keep getting more efficient. When we've got 10 million years of civilization and agriculture under our belt, the precision that we're going to be operating with is going to be incredible. It's probably out of the realm of our comprehension right now, if I'm being honest. But where I do hope we differ from the ants is this. Even after all of those millions of years, the ants seem to operate in an unexplainable way. Yet at the same time, their objective seems to be basically just survival. They just want to keep their species alive. They go, collect the leaves, bring them back, harvest them into food. They have their entire civilization set up, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of progress. And my hope is that eventually our efficiency is going to breed a healthier and happier existence for humanity. Hopefully, more peace and prosperity. And I guess a global accessibility to health and happiness for everyone. Because I think if we accomplish that, then the objective of our efficiency won't be survival like the ants. I think instead it's going to be progress. And I think if we continue to make progress, then maybe we'll have a chance to meet whoever it is in the universe that views us in the same way that we view the ants. Because as we sit here today, the aliens probably look at us like we look at the ants, complex, inexplicable in like a bunch of ways, but also not able to directly communicate with us for now. Anyway, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. I know a lot of people say that, but I really mean it. It would be really cool to see this thing keep growing. I'm really enjoying doing it, and so if you like it, if you could just please subscribe and share it with some people you know, that would be awesome. As always, I want to shout out my family and friends, especially everybody back in Chicago, all the boys. You know who you are. Thanks for all the support. We're getting this thing rolling, and honestly, I couldn't be more excited about it. I'm having a great time, and I just hope everybody keeps listening. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.